Hi everybody. Here's another wonderful Groves video that has to do with WordPress. So this time we're going to be talking about headers and talking about changing the colors of your site, okay? Now, some of you claim not to be designers, okay? But you do have a sensibility of what looks good and what doesn't look good. And if you're having trouble of saying, well, you know what, I don't know the color wheel, I don't know how to choose good colors, blah, 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 right? Well, remember our wonderful site, colorhex.com, okay? And you can go in there and choose a color, and you can choose a color by your hexadecimal code, and you can look around and try to find something that's close to what you're interested in looking for, okay? So in this case, I picked this kind of drury red type color, this maroon, okay? And what this does is this gives you some contrast to choose from. So you can choose your base color, get some tints that allow you to choose. Maybe I have a text color that will contrast to the background color. And then I can get a complementary color to get a little bit of, complement to what I'm looking for. And maybe I want some contrast, a little more contrast. If I want to go a little bit crazier, I can add some of these colors. You can kind of just play around with them and see what's appealing to your eye. And what's wonderful about the ColorHex site is that it also gives you some CSS that you can end up using. And it gives you some text shadows, some background color, some different things that you can use to help you out. And if you don't like this particular version of the color, you can go down here and see some variations of the color that you're looking for. So this is very helpful. So I've started with this color. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose this as a background color. And I'm gonna probably choose, I'll just go with this one as a text color just to try things out. So I've got my hexadecimal codes for the two primary colors I'm gonna use for my site, okay? That's also gonna inform what I wanna do with my header if I wanna do a more designed header in Photoshop, okay? Which is what we're gonna do. So let's go to the dashboard. And the first thing we're gonna do is go to our appearance. And what you're going to have, you can get to various things in the appearance here, but most of the things now in the newer versions of WordPress are all under this Customize menu, okay? And this gets you to most of what you want to do. I'm using the theme 2016, which is just a basic theme, not anything fancy, just so you can kind of get an idea of some things you can do with tweaking your theme. So in this theme, I can actually, this gives me an option of what I can change. Now, some of you have more complicated themes, so you have a whole lot more options here than I do. But this is a basic one, so what I can do is I'm going to look at my colors. And now this allows me to change whatever colors I want. And remember, the first base color we're going to use for our background is this 6C1A20. Okay, 6C1A20. See if we can remember that. Now, WordPress has some built-in color schemes, so we could actually start playing with these if we don't want to go through all this hassle of choosing our colors. Ooh, that's a little ugly. Okay, let's go back to gray. Okay, so here we are. We're on the background. Let's change the background color to that one. You remember what it was? 6C1A20. Okay, there's that red. Oh, wait a minute, background color. It's changing the background. It didn't change all of the background. That's okay, because that's the main background of the entire site. And then you have a page background color. And we can make it the same color if we want to, okay? 6C1A20. There we go. That looks pretty good. The white's a little stark. So now let's go to that one color that I had picked before that wasn't quite as bright as white. We were doing this D2BABC. D2BABC. So let's go to main text color. D2BABC. And now we get that. Okay, now that's not the most gorgeous thing that's in there, but it's a start. And I'm just doing it for D2. Now we've got our text this kind of unusual little tint, okay? And that's just to give you an idea of what you can do. You can change it to whatever you want, but this gives you some variation. Okay, so let's be bold. Let's do the complementary color. 1A6C66, 1A6C66, 1A6C. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Huh? Kind of your secondary text color if you want it for that. Okay, we'll just leave that. That's kind of an interesting. So now, even though you're not a design person, you've got this kind of interesting color scheme. And we can always change it later if we want to. Okay, so now we have our new color scheme. Save and publish. Woohoo. Now we can go back. Now the next thing you want to look at is this idea of the header image. And this was that day in class that we were talking a little bit about Photoshop, and it seemed like most people knew about Photoshop, but I'm going to do this one more time, walking you through just to make sure you're good on how to use this. So even if you're not a Photoshop expert, you can do some very basic things in Photoshop. Really, the big thing on Photoshop is getting in there and playing around with it and getting used to the tools, and then you'll find you'll gain some confidence, because part of what you're doing with Photoshop is you're just trying to get a feel for what the different tools do to change the image. Okay, and then it's just a matter of finding those tools, and there are a bazillion tutorial videos on YouTube that can help you with this. Now, why we're going to this is this gives us the size that we need to create our own header. So we need a 1200 by 280 pixel header. Okay, and that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to fire up Photoshop and I'll be back in a moment. Hold on. Okay, I've got Photoshop fired up now, right? And in Photoshop, what I've done is I've done File, New. I'm creating a new file. And in this case, I'm going to give this the name of my header image, because this is the site. It's Changing Journalism. So give it the name of your site, because remember, the file names matter. And that's what we're going to call this one. And what we're going to do is customize the document type. And what I've done is I've entered in the width, which is 1200 pixels. Remember, that's what it said in our, if we went to our site. Remember, 1200 by 280 pixels. So that's what I'm entering here. 1200 pixels wide by 280 pixels high. Let's give it 300 pixels per inch to get a nice fine resolution. We can choose the RGB color mode so we get millions of color, 16-bit color. And then we have this background content. Now you can specify a color if you want. So we can give it a background color of that original 6C1A20, okay? We can put that. Or we can give it a transparent background, which means it will take the background of whatever image, whatever we put it on top of. Now keep in mind, to keep your background transparent, it has to be either a GIF file or a PNG file. It can't be a JPEG, because JPEGs can't have transparent background. So that may create some issues for you. So if you want to be really, really safe, you can do your background color. And you can click on this, on your background color, and you can type in the color that you got from ColorHex, which will give you that same color. Okay, and note I did it here. So I hit OK. Now I have my background color, and I hit OK. And now I've got this image that I can play around with. Okay, so there it is. And notice I've got, as I expand this out, oops, I've got my background layer. And what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to add a new layer. So what you want to do is go to the menu, click on Layer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a new layer. And I'm just going to make it a blank layer. I'm just going to call it Text. For my text layer, now what you have to do here, here's your toolbar, and these are all the bazillion things that you can do, and it's a little bit daunting at first glance. Okay, the main ones you need to know, you can use cropping to crop your photos and shrink them down. You can also use this to move things around on your canvas. And then you have the text tool, which is really handy. And then you have the fill tool that allows you to add colors to whatever your thing is. So with those basic tools, you can do a whole lot. You can actually make some things look really nice. So even if you aren't artistic, or you're a little bit daunted by this crazy, all these things, you know, like the dodge and burn tool, and oh my gosh, what are all these things called? They kind of frighten me. Just focus on the text, Focus on cropping and focus on moving things around, and then your color palette. This is your foreground color, this is your background color for whatever item that you're creating. Okay? Simple enough. So now we're doing a text tool. All we're going to do is put some text on top of this. Now notice the foreground color for my text, I'm going to make it this D2BABC. Remember, that was the foreground color that I got from my color hacks. Now, I don't have all these memorized. I write them down. So what I would do is write them down so you know what you're doing. Okay, I have my text tool. And what you'll notice about the text tool here is every time you change a tool, this context bar changes. And this gives you all different kinds of things that are specific to this tool. So if I click on crop, it changes this to a crop tool. And as I move through the tools, this top thing will change. Okay, but I want the text tool. So then it goes to text. It gives me the different fonts, what type of font, the size of the font, whether I want it sharp or aliased, whether I want it justified, all those different kinds of things, right? Okay. If this seems a little big and you want to shrink the palette, you can double click down here. I'm going to make it 85%. Okay, that didn't help a whole lot. Nice job. There we go. Now it fits on the whole screen. And what we can do here, I'm going to put in some text. So I've got a 30-point text of this Kifa font. Okay, that looks like it's going to be big enough. And I'm going to type in my changing journalism. And it's a little bit off screen. So what I can do, you notice when you move your cursor, it changes what form you have. So I can move this. Okay. And notice when you move it around, okay, it's not helping me out, but it gets me where I want to go. Another way to move this around is to use your movement tool. And notice what you get is this nice little line to tell you when you've centered it. Oops, except when I do that. So that can be really helpful. And now I've got this. So this looks pretty nice, and I could just use this and save this and insert it as my header. Or what you can do is you can add a new layer. And this is where the fun of Photoshop is and what people like to do. And you can do all kinds of things. I'm not going to show you all the different contortions you can do. You look under the filter menu, you can do all kinds of things to change the look of your picture. Now what it'll want to do before you can use some of these is it will want to rasterize your image. And basically what that means is it wants to flatten your image and make it one image. This is why a lot of people like to design logos and do things in Illustrator, because it keeps things so you can move things around and adjust them, whereas Photoshop wants to flatten everything. So what we can do here, you notice this, I've got my separate layers. It may want to compress them into one image. So that's what you have to be careful with the filters. Now if I add my little layer here, I'm going to add a layer style, and just a very simple thing to do to add a little bit of elegance to your logo is to add a drop shadow. Okay? So here's what we can do with a drop shadow. You'll notice now I have the shadow that appears, and it gives me a color, and I can change where the light is coming from, which makes it look a little better. And then you can change the distance it's from there. That looks obnoxious. So I usually keep it fairly close just to give it a little lift. And you can deal with the spread to make it do different things if you want. And you can change the size of it so you can make it really huge. The bigger it is, the more that you're, so I can get a little bit of glow. I'm not going to do that again. I like to be less is more for me. So I like to, let's give it a size of about 7. Spread. Let's give it that much spread. Give it to there. So that looks pretty good. That just gives me something that I can play with. So I hit OK. Now I've got my image, I've got a logo, and that gives me a header that is perfectly sized for my website. Okay, now I've got this image. Now keep in mind, whenever you do media editing, so those of you that have used Final Cut Pro, you know that you're you've got a file that you use for working with Final Cut, and then you have the actual file that you export. That's the media file. Photoshop works the same way. If you save it, you're going to save a Photoshop file, which is a PSD file, okay, which references an image that you're working with. But what you want is you want to create the actual media image, so you actually have to export what it is that you're dealing with. Those of you that have used sound editors, it's the same way. So if you use a program like Audition or Audacity, that's what happens. You get the sound file in there, you do the editing, it saves it as an Audition file, but you have to export the media file. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to export this file. So I do File, Export. And what's nice about this new version of Photoshop is that there is a quick export. You'll notice older versions will have this Save for Web, which requires you to do a few more steps. In this case, I'm just going to do this quick export as a PNG file. I'm going to save it to my desktop. Save, yes, I'm going to replace that. And now I have the file on my desktop. Now I'm going to go back to my website, and what's going to happen is I'm going to upload the header image. So I'm going to add a new image. You can see that I've already uploaded it, but I'll do it again just for grins. You go to your image. The media library shows you the images that are already there. The upload allows you to upload it, and when you do it, it appears in the media library. I'm going to click on that, select and crop. It's already fit because I sized it in Photoshop, so I don't have to crop it. I can skip the cropping. And lo and behold, ding, 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 after some magic and uploading and playing around, unless it's going to prove me wrong, and then it gets uploaded. So there it is. But now look what happened. So we got the nice logo, but then we got this. So it's like, hey, wait a minute, I don't want that. Okay, so what you can do then is go back. Oop, I forgot to save and publish. So now I've changed my logo. I'm going to go back. And what you have to do is go to Site Identity. Now you notice you can also add a logo, but that's going to put that up here. I have my site title and tagline, and I'm going to eliminate that. Now, one thing you may want to do is, now that I look at that, that looks a little naked, doesn't it? What you want is that little tagline that we have before, Thoughts on Media from that Groves guy. That's going to make it look nice. For those of you that have clients, what you may want to do is have your main logo of the name of your client, and then you can put your address and phone number, and you can play around with those by adding another text layer in here, right? You just need to shrink the size of the text and play around. You can add some more text boxes. So what I would do is add a new text layer and put some items on it and maneuver these around the way that you want them to look, okay? But that gives you the basics. That gives you the basics of playing around with the text in Photoshop, experiment a little bit with it. Now we played around with the colors, and now the site looks quite a bit different, right? Now I have a customized logo. It doesn't look quite so much like everybody else's WordPress site. I've added some colors. It's something that's a little bit different. So hope that helps you out. Experiment with it, play around, and we will see you soon.